Everyone, welcome to Computer Science E7. This is Lecture 7, More Software Tools. So one of the things that we released today were the guidelines for the final project. And basically it's pretty simple what you have to do. The guidelines are basically to make one. And we do have some technical guidelines a little bit beyond that. And I'm sure that some of you or many of you or all of you will have questions about direction, like, well, what are some examples of some final projects that I can do, and basically whatever you can think of where you are taking digital photos and can produce them digitally. So you have to take digital photos and then you manipulate them on your computer, and then you can basically do whatever you want with them after that. And some people prefer to have a collection of photos. Some people prefer to do something web-based, like a gallery, for example, an online gallery of images. And there's a variety of things, and I'll be showing you some examples. But just to give you an idea, you'll be submitting one or more digital photos for the completion of this final project. And if it's just one photo, it has to be something that you put a lot of work into. You can't just go outside, take a photo, say, that's it for E7, submit it, and be done. That will not be very good. Just to give you an idea, the amount of work that you put into this final project should be approximately equal to maybe 2 assignments in terms of the photos that you're taking, in terms of the time for the photos that you are taking and the time that you're using to actually work on them and manipulate them. And so just actually taking photos is one thing, and that's one of the things that we've been focusing on primarily in a lot of the first assignments, is just taking photos and submitting them as they are. But in the final project, you can manipulate them however you want digitally, and that includes Photoshop manipulation, enhancing the contrast, cropping, doing all sorts of really wild and crazy things that you want to do with them to achieve a goal for the final project. Remember that this class bills itself as teaching the technical side so that you can really let the creative juices flow elsewhere, so that you will be able to know or be able to understand how to operate a camera, and then by knowing how to do that, you can then let your artistic vision come to fruition, and that is what this final project is meant to do. So if you submit photos, and generally speaking, for pretty much anything that you do, you will need to submit at least one JPEG format photo to the Flickr photo stream. So just keep that in mind. But the end result can be a variety of different formats, like a book, for example, or a movie. It really depends on what you want to do, poster-sized image. So you can take photos in the raw format, and in fact, I recommend that because as we'll see today and in some future lectures, you have a lot more latitude over raw data than you do over just simply JPEG files. So I recommend taking photos in raw, but you must submit them in JPEG. So basically, in addition to that, you just have to write just a very quick, I call it a paper, but it's just a page or two, really short, about how you created the photo, what your motivation was, a variety of things, and there's some more information about that. So the first thing to keep in mind is that the proposal, you will have to create a proposal just so that we can vet your idea and make sure that it will be of enough consequence, perhaps I could say. And then you will send that proposal to us at an email address, proposal@csc7.org, by November 23rd. So you really have just under a month to think of some ideas, get some more of the tools and more of the lectures underneath your belt before you try to decide what is possible and what you might want to do with your particular image or images. And of course, if you want to send us email about questions or anything like that, we welcome that, and you're free to do that. There's more information on the proposal, which is available also in PDF format online. There's more information on that itself, and I'll have to defer to that. So one of the things that you'll notice is missing from this proposal are actually the steps to submit your final project. So we have to work out some details on our end for that, and that information will be available by the time your proposals are due at the end of November. And that shouldn't really matter because none of you should be submitting final projects a month before the class is over anyway. So if you have any questions about that, do let us know. And of course, the the culmination of the course, we end with a computer science fair, a joint fair between us and Computer Science E75, building dynamic websites, taught by David Malin, just downstairs, going on right this very minute, in fact. And whereas they design websites, we design images. And last year, we did this in the spring semester, and it was actually really, really interesting to see what everybody had submitted in both classes. And I have to say that I thought the E7 projects were quite a bit better than the E75. And if you happen to be in both classes, then, well, now you know which one you have to work harder on. So just to give you an idea, we have done a final project in the past couple of semesters for this course, and we do have some interesting things that I thought I might share with you. So as an example, I mentioned that you can decide to submit not only just a portfolio of images if you want, or even a poster-sized image, but you could do something web-based. And just because I'm showing you this doesn't mean that you have to do something web-based or you have to do a movie or something like that. It really is whatever you have the inclination to do. So here is one by a student a year ago, or a year and a half ago rather, where he took photos of people's faces, and then using a web page you can recombine different faces by using some of these arrow keys. So you can choose somebody's eyes, somebody else's nose, and somebody else's mouth, and get some really strange, really fun looking photographs. And sometimes they blend surprisingly well, and sometimes, well, they don't blend that well, just depending on the photos. But those were, I think, that was a very good display of not only of the images itself, but also the display. So then we have a student who actually rented some equipment. She didn't have all of the equipment that she thought would be necessary to complete a final project. So she went to, I might have mentioned this before, but Calumet, and you can rent some big expensive lenses if you don't actually want to have to buy them, and basically covered the Boston Marathon. So E7 used to be a spring course before this semester, and so she covered the Boston Marathon and in sort of a photojournalistic style, and submitted a variety of photographs from that event. And that was something that was particularly interesting, I thought. Let's see, what else do I have here? Yes, so we did have one submission that was where a student had compiled a number of panoramas, and she submitted several of them, but I think I'll just show you this one, which I think is particularly interesting because it is, oops, oh boy. So because it is actually of a martial arts center of some kind. I forget exactly the name, but what was striking to me was that it's completely continuous. In other words, there's motion going on throughout the image, but it all blends seamlessly. Typically, when you take a diorama with images in them, or a panorama rather, with images in them or with movement in them, what you see between the stitched images is sort of this ghost-like effect of where motion had taken place or should have taken place and is no longer there. But I remember looking at this image pretty intently and not really being able to find those seams, and I thought that was particularly well done as well. Let's see. So, I mean, there's so many good ones to show you. It would take me a long time to do it. So one student from a couple of years ago actually did a flipbook style animation. So she also submitted a movie online, or basically a digital movie of a flipbook style, and it's actually really neat, I think, to be able to flip through the animation. I'll actually go ahead and pass this around, ignore the coffee stain on the top. That was my accident. And I think that was also something that was really neat, something that we haven't seen very much of lately. I think they were in vogue certainly some number of years ago, and then not so much anymore. Another one is, for example, this storefronts of Boston, where this is again a web page, but I think even if we just look at the images by themselves, it's very interesting to try to take a look at the style, the composition, and the end result of some of these images, how they actually came out. And I think this was also really quite good. Let's see, do I have another one? Oh yes, so here's one where I believe in software, a student wanted to replicate the look of tilt-shift lenses. So in other words, to make real-life images look like very small macro shots by increasing the depth of field. So not only did he have to get quite a bit of elevation in order to capture an image like this, but he also had to then work out how to accomplish this in software. Let's see, I think I have a few more I can show you. So just to prove to you that I think that having a portfolio of images is just as valid as any of these other types. One student covered a, oh man, I'm blanking. This was the big boat race that occurred in May or June of this year. It must have been April or May of this year. And he actually covered that event, as this was something, there it is, the Volvo Ocean Race of 2009, as this was something that he was particularly interested in at the time as well. There's a really neat shot in here somewhere, but I don't want to waste too much of our time looking at this stuff. Oh yeah, so some very good, excellent images in this collection here. Let's see. Of course, some people went for the more abstract and wanted something that was a little bit scarier, maybe a little bit crazier than just these sort of ordinary, so to speak, images that we would see, or rather ordinary in the sense of everyday things. So we might have a sort of a freaky dollhouse sort of scenario, or let's see, where's oops, not this one. Or we might also have, for example, come on, mermaid. Okay. Let's see, I think I might have one more. Oh yeah, so last one I'll show you for now is this one by a student who decided to, there was some local history that he really wanted to cover, and this was specifically the route of the old Trolley 29 that I believe went through Arlington and possibly Lexington. And yes, we have to wait forever for it to load the preview. It's this very large, ended up being this very large PowerPoint presentation full of not only information, but also images, of course, about the actual route itself. So he actually followed along the route and used that as an opportunity to sort of highlight interesting aspects of that particular route. And so I'm showing you all of these as just examples of what you might be able to accomplish with your final project. So really, it's meant to be something that you can call your own and make it personal to you. And if you can do that, then it's something that you'll also be very successful at, because something that you're passionate about will reflect in your images and in your work. And so that's this is one of the things. This is really, I think, an excellent example of what this class aims to be. Is that once you've learned all of this stuff, then you can apply it. And as you can see, all of these photos have been really excellent. They've been really very good examples of what students are able to accomplish by the time this class is over. So that's a little bit of an advertisement for this course, which you are of course already taking, so it's perhaps not totally necessary, but also meant to just give you an idea about what we can do. So today we're going to focus on the software tools, how you can accomplish some of the things that you saw. For example, that really stylized mermaid effect that you saw. Maybe we're not going to go into how to do that specifically, but introduce some of these tools that will help you be able to do them. One of them, of course, is Photoshop. So being able to use Photoshop to manipulate images, edit them, is important to us as digital photographers, to be able to stylize your photos how you may want them, unless your goal is to have very representative, very neutral images that represent the original scene in the most accurate way possible. But even beyond that, you might still use Photoshop if you take photos in the RAW format, for example. these photos are not a format that you can just upload to Flickr or to your friend over email and be able to expect them to really look at the image, because it's a proprietary image format. It's difficult for us to view them, and converting them to JPEG makes it a lot more portable and a lot easier for us to be able to view. And so using Photoshop, we can certainly do that. Now, one of the things about this course that you may notice is that we do place a large emphasis on the technical aspect. And so as a result of that, we also sometimes talk a lot about the equipment itself, and we start getting all wide-eyed and really impressed by some of the specifications, some of the text that we can read about equipment on paper. And this may not be, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. That's not necessarily the best way to approach photography. And really one of the most important things about photography, of course, is the photographers, the person actually using the camera. But the equipment is really just a means to an end. And there reaches a point where, sure, you might spend quite a bit of money to buy an SLR and maybe some lenses and some nice equipment, but there reaches a point where in order to get incrementally better equipment, you have to spend a lot more money, and that certainly happens at the higher end of a lot of this equipment. So I don't want you to get the wrong idea that you absolutely have to have the most expensive equipment, the best equipment that exists out there today, because you might find yourself with all of this expensive equipment and maybe not the will to use it all of the time. It's really something that you have to gauge for yourself. And in fact, one of the pitfalls of using new equipment all of the time is if you purchase a new camera and you take photos with this camera. This is the new shiny camera on the block. It's just released and everybody's all excited about it. You take a bunch of photos in RAW format because that's what you do, and you try to open it in Photoshop, and you might see something like this. Try to open the RAW file and it says, could not complete your request because Photoshop does not recognize this type of file. And this is really, really frustrating. And in fact, this is the exact scenario that has just happened to me, though I admittedly knew that this was going to happen. This is something that we have to try to combat. And unfortunately, because these file formats are proprietary and they're tied to specific cameras, they're tied to specific camera manufacturers, it's not the quickest process. So this third-party software like Photoshop, like Lightroom, like Apple Aperture, cannot open the RAW files the first few months, the first few weeks, the first few months that a camera is out. So if you buy a shiny new camera, you might run into this sort of problem. And if that happens, you will have to eventually update the RAW software, the RAW engine that can interpret these files. Now for Photoshop, I'm showing you Adobe's website that allows us to download what's called the Camera Raw Update. And it is this update that allows us to get the latest and greatest essentially add-on, you can think of it as, to Photoshop to be able to open these RAW files. And you can find this just literally by Googling around for Adobe Camera Raw or a variety of other things that have Photoshop and Camera Raw in them. But you'll notice yet another pitfall about this. Let's see. No, where is it? Oh no. All right, so here we go. This small bit of text down here, and I'll make the text bigger so we can see it. Maybe I can. Okay, we have to continue waiting for my pitifully slow computer. Okay, here we go. So it says, support for the following cameras is included in Camera Raw 5 and Lightroom 2. Camera Raw 5 and later is not compatible with Photoshop CS3. Now, if you're familiar with Photoshop, you know that CS4 is the latest and greatest version. And you might also know that Photoshop is a very expensive piece of software to begin with. And so for them to stop support for CS3, which is just one version old, is bad for us. So we're not going to talk about anything like how this is bad for the consumer and try to push Adobe and to do the right thing, or that sort of thing. But this is actually a problem for us, is that to use the latest and greatest, and if you do spend a bit more money to get the newest camera, you might find that you also have to upgrade some other things like this software as well. Luckily, all of you as students at the Extension School get a bit of a freebie. You can download the latest version of Photoshop and be able to download this latest Camera Raw 5. So unless you have pretty much the newest cameras that were released in the past few months, you will be able to use your camera with it. And now, of course, I should mention that older cameras that are more than several months old, are very well supported across different versions. So this really, you really don't have to spend money to upgrade or do anything like that unless you run into this problem that I'm describing. If it works in another version, then by all means use that. But you can actually download Photoshop from FAS. And so this has been looking up downloads.fas.harvard.edu since I started blabbing about 25 minutes ago. So this is not going to work right now. But if you go to, let's see, downloads.fas.harvard.edu, you can download the Adobe Photoshop software. Now I have to mention that you do need some other software as well. And the reason that I'm telling you all of this is so that you can download this software onto your computer if you don't have it already, because coming soon you will start to need to use Photoshop for your assignments. So I'm trying to help you get a head start with this. So after you go here, you log in with your Harvard ID, and you get past this screen that isn't working for me. Let's see, I'll try clicking there again. Oh, good. So hopefully this time it'll work. Now it'll present you with a variety of things that you can download. You need 2, maybe 3 things in order for this to work. First of all, of course, is Photoshop itself. So, oh man, really? Gotta do this again? All right, I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna use my, my little password saver thing. Yeah, it's also because it's really long, my password for this. Okay, so after we wait for a few seconds, you'll see a list of downloads, and you could actually go crazy and download it, as much stuff as you want, but we're not going to deal with all the other stuff. We really want Photoshop, which is under P here. Yep. All right, so you can download it here. You'll notice that it's actually quite large. It's about a gigabyte in size. So you might need to, if you have a slow connection, you might need to wait quite a while. Of course, you should make sure that you download it for the correct version of your operating system, be it Windows or Mac OS. Yes? Major differences between CS3 and CS4, I don't actually know. I stopped paying attention to the differences between Photoshop versions a while ago, frankly. I think the changes recently have been more incremental, so more, and to quote what is fast becoming an internet cliche, more evolutionary rather than revolutionary. So right now, I have to admit, I do have an older version of Photoshop installed, CS3, and that's one of the reasons why you saw that error message, was because I don't have the latest version of Camera Raw. But anyway, the fundamental differences between Photoshop CS4 that you can download here and CS3, which I have installed on my computers, it's not very major. There might be some minor things. There might be some new filters, some new features, but it's not really going to be a deal breaker in terms of your use. So you can really use any of these modern CS and then some number version of Photoshop. In fact, I have an ancient CS1 version on my computer at home because I haven't wanted to pay for Photoshop since. Yes?
Are these downloads the full versions?
Good.
Any different than buying it?
Yes, so that brings me to my next point. So is this software the full version? And the answer is yes, but kind of. So there is a caveat to it. When you download it and you use it, it is the full uninhibited version. It's completely as if you were using the $700 Photoshop program. But the trick with this is this little word right here where it says keyed. Now, what this means is that Harvard has a fixed number of licenses available to it, and they can only allow their students, all of you, including me, they can only allow that many students or people to use that software at any one point in time. So in addition to Photoshop, you also need something else that manages this sort of counting, so to speak, and that is the key server. And I know it's confusing, but you can find it at the bottom. But basically, before you even download Photoshop, I'd recommend downloading this key server, installing it on your computer, then you can try to install Photoshop. Except for one thing. This works great if you are on Harvard's campus, if you are using Harvard's internet. It doesn't work great if you are sitting at home. Now, the reason that key server works is because it knows you're on Harvard's internet, and it then authenticates you. It says, okay, you must be allowed to use Harvard's resources, and therefore it allows you to use Photoshop. So if you are off campus, in addition to these two things, you must also download the VPN client. This allows you to log into Harvard, which then allows the key server to communicate with whatever key server, wherever it is, and then you can open Photoshop. So if you're sitting at home, what I recommend is download the VPN client first, download the key server next. So what I mean is download and install. So you download the VPN client, download the key server, then you can download and install Photoshop. Okay, now that we've wasted a lot of time talking about that, then you can have it up and running. Was there a question?
Just quickly, so that means you can't use this software in offline mode at all. You have to be counted as a concurrent user of the software. You have to be online.
I think the official answer is yes, but the unofficial answer is no. So I think it works if you, it only does, as far as I know, it only does, unless they've updated it, it only does the key server authentication when it starts up the program. And then I believe you can go offline, potentially. Right, so as long as you keep Photoshop running, it will continue running. Yes?
Which is rude to your fellow students because there are only so many licenses. So if you
Right.
Photoshop running forever, it means no one else can.
Right, yeah, and so like I said, yeah, exactly. So just to repeat, so that, I mean, because there are a fixed number of licenses, if you keep it open all the time, then you're possibly disallowing somebody else to use that particular license. Yes?
One more question. Unless something has changed drastically in the last couple of months, in order to run VPN client, you had to have an email address at fas.harvard.edu, which any of us can get, but you have to know that you need to go and apply for your FAS email account, which you never ever have to use for email. You just need to actually have one in order for VPN clients to work so you can log in.
Yeah, that is a very good point. So I'll just repeat again for the camera. So to use the VPN client, you have to have an @FAS email address, which means that you just have to apply for one. It's online, and you don't actually have to use it for anything. But once you have it, and you have to be registered for this course to get it, it's getting complicated. But you can see that if you have questions, you can email us. You can, well, I'm sure John will talk about it briefly, hopefully in section. I just, I'm forcing him to do it now, right? So. It would be a good activity for section, but you can see it's nice once you have all of this done, because you open up Photoshop and you see it says some message about the key server is running or something like that, and it opens up and it's a big sigh of relief. But I mean, that's just one hurdle, because then you have to deal with Photoshop itself, right? So that's sort of the next thing. Was there a question somewhere else? Yes. What about them?
Will those work just fine, or is that something you steer away from for any reason?
So simpler versions of Photoshop, like Elements, I don't actually know what the functional differences are offhand between Elements and Photoshop. I'm talking about Photoshop here because it's sort of the de facto standard, and so I don't want to introduce this other software that's not lesser, but maybe more introductory in terms of its features than the full-featured Photoshop. But if that's what you have, then you're free to use it. When I'm talking about software manipulation, you can use anything that you want. There's free versions, not free versions of Photoshop, but there's free alternatives to Photoshop. Like I believe there's one called the unfortunately named GIMP software, and you can download that for free, and that's, I haven't used that, but I know that that's a free alternative as well. But I mean, as you can see, there's a lot of nuances here and all of this stuff, but what I'm talking about is, for the purposes of this class, we're using Photoshop, but you're free to use whatever software manipulation or photo manipulation software that you would like. Okay, any other questions before we move on? All right, great.